Rising gas prices are causing some people to look at EVs more than before, and that includes the plug-in hybrid, which is marketed as a low-carbon alternative to conventional gasoline cars. But recent research states that CO2 emissions from PHEVs are 2.5 times higher than official tests suggested. Some people are saying plug-ins are fake electric cars. So, what's the truth? Today I'm busting some myths and exposing the truth about the plug-in hybrid, so you can judge for yourself if it's a wolf in sheep's clothing. A plug-in hybrid, or PHEV, is a hybrid car with a combustion engine and an electric motor, but with a larger battery pack than a conventional hybrid. The advantage is it can run for longer on pure electric power alone. A plug-in hybrid car runs on electric power until the battery is almost depleted. Then the vehicle automatically switches over to the combustion engine. In general, most PHEVs dry up after about 20 miles on an average day or 30 miles on a good day. Some of the latest PHEVs have an official pure electric range of more than 50 miles. Today, the top 3 PHEVs in Europe are the Volvo XC40, the Peugeot 3008, and the BMW 3 Series. Did you know that more long-range plug-in hybrids are just around the corner? Mercedes has a PHEV that offers around 60 miles of battery-only range. PHEVs provide a flexibility that some say is unmatched by most other technologies. They have greater extended range. They're a good option for out-of-town journeys and battery power in urban areas. They can typically charge up within a few hours, and they can even improve the air quality in a city. But recently, there's been a huge controversy surrounding the PHEV. Greenpeace UK even went so far as calling them a wolf in sheep's clothing. It turns out that the CO2 emissions from PHEVs are more than 2.5 times higher than what is stated in the official test results. Official tests showed that these vehicles emitted 1.55 ounces or 44 grams of CO2 per kilometer. But in reality, the average PHEV emits around 4.12 ounces or 117 grams. To put that in perspective, a new PHEV would emit about 28 tons of carbon dioxide over its lifetime. Compare that to a gasoline car, which emits about 39 tons, and a diesel car, which emits 41. By those numbers, PHEVs are more environmentally friendly. But nevertheless, this doesn't justify car makers from underreporting the true levels. The European Federation of Transport and Environment, or TNE, is a non-profit organization that campaigns for cleaner transportation. They say that Europe is sleepwalking towards another Dieselgate. Dieselgate was a scandal back in 2015 when Volkswagen was exposed for cheating emissions tests. So what's the basis for TNE's conclusion? Well, they tested 3 of the top-selling PHEVs under real-world conditions, specifically the BMW X5, the Volvo XC60, and the Mitsubishi Outlander. They found that CO2 emissions were between 28 and 89% higher than what the manufacturers claimed themselves. Driving in battery charging mode instead of full battery significantly increased emissions. And on an empty battery, the vehicles could only drive 6 to 14 miles before going over their official CO2s per mile claim. T&E called the PHEVs fake electric cars. They said they were built for lab tests and tax breaks, but not real driving. The test showed that even in optimal condition, full battery, the vehicles polluted more than was advertised. So if you were to take your PHEV on the road but forgot to charge the battery before you left, it may switch to the fossil fuel powered motor. If you accelerate too quickly, it may switch to the fossil fuel powered motor. And if you turn on your air conditioner as you're driving, you guessed it may switch to the fossil fuel powered motor. Carbon emissions could go off the charts unless you drive your PHEV as softly and slowly as you can. But not everybody is siding with T&E on this research. Take, for example, the European Automotive Manufacturers Association, or ACEA. This is a trade body that represents Europe's car makers. They say that the T&E's testing methods weren't representative of the typical use of plug-in hybrids. Of course, these people are involved in the manufacturing of the hybrid, so I'd take what they say with a grain of salt. Now, they say PHEVs are intended to be driven in full electric mode over short daily trips. They believe that CO2 emissions of PHEVs depend on how they are being used by the driver, which obviously isn't something the car makers can control. Recent headlines dubbed the plug-in hybrid as the hated pariah. If the PHEV does does have some positive benefits, why has it become so hated by so many people? Well, one of the factors is that some big fleet operators exploited tax exemption rules by buying PHEVs. But then they didn't force their drivers to drive them sensibly. Here's the thing. These companies' car drivers don't pay for their own gas, so they have no real incentive to plug in the vehicles. After all, why bother charging the car if the company will pay for your gas? Because of this, lots of corporate-owned, tax-funded PHEVs consume more fuel than the combustion engine cars they replace. The irony and the futility. Now the companies could address this by imposing the rules or geofencing, but that hasn't happened, at least not yet. If you thought that was bad, there are even more deceptive PHEV claims that have been circulating recently. One research found that some popular PHEVs had as little as a third of the fuel economy advertised in official tests. These findings were based on tests that were done on 22 vehicles, including BMW, Mercedes-Benz, Mitsubishi, Volkswagen, and Volvo. On average, they burned 61% more fuel than in the official tests. Wondering which PHEV performed the worst? It was the BMW X5 plug-in hybrid SUV. It had a whopping 72% efficiency difference. That means paying $870 more than expected in gas costs each year. And that extra fuel burned would mean higher CO2 emissions. Even the environmental benefits of PHEVs are controversial. The car industry argues that they are a crucial stepping stone to help transition consumers to fully electric cars. But some environmental advocates argue that PHEVs can actually be less green than cars without a battery if they are not regularly recharged. By law, cars sold in Europe must be tested according to the Worldwide Harmonized Light Vehicle Test Procedure, or WLTP. But many argue that these do not reflect real-world driving conditions. Some have even gone so far to say that the official fuel economy emission tests are a crucial distortion of reality. But there's another side to all of this. They say the European advocacy group, whose goal was to end the use of liquid fuels in vehicles, circulated this big fat myth that PHEVs don't pollute more than regular cars. In a nutshell, they argue that in the U.S., automakers don't make pollution or mile per gallon claims. They only publish the EPA test results. Talk about a technicality. Sometimes automakers will try to predict efficiency or emissions based on EPA format testing. But it's really only the EPA that rates U.S. model vehicles for emissions and efficiency. It's true some automakers have cheated on MPG-related issues in the past for financial gain. But for U.S. vehicles, automakers don't advertise any efficiency or emissions claims other than what the EPA's testing mandate finds. They do acknowledge one truth, though. They say that the way alternative fuel additives view how PHEVs operate is flawed. Gas-powered cars require catalytic converters so they can lower polluting emissions. All these converters need to be hot to function properly. PHEV opponents say that since the PHEV's engine cycles on and off, the converters are never properly heated, so emissions are much higher than what was claimed. But they say that hybrids like the Prius have heat capture technology to warm the engines and catalytic converters more efficiently and quickly than conventional vehicles. This heat is stored, and so a few engine cycles on a short trip don't negatively impact the converters on a Prius. And Prius earns the same 10/10 EPA smog ratings as a Chevy Bolt EV. The biggest problems that some have with this myth is that it isn't logical. Let's say a driver of a RAV4 Prime covers 40 miles on a daily commute and only uses electricity. There'd be zero tailpipe emissions. But another RAV4 Prime daily covers 60 miles and uses a cold engine for part of the trip. Which is the emission standard based on? On 20 miles of gas operation? The chief executive of the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders, Mike Hawes, also described the T&E test as flawed, and that it relied on figures from a testing regime that was no longer being used. So are plug-in hybrids doomed to fail? Or are they the cars of the future? Well, you may be surprised to learn that plug-in hybrids are actually quite popular, at least in Europe. In the first half of last year, EVs won almost 23% of the German market, plug-in hybrids being at about 12% and battery EVs near 11%. And PHEVs accounted for 58% of all rechargeable cars sold in the biggest 18 Western European markets in January 2021. Forecasters are predicting this will be a peak for PHEVs because battery EVs, or BEVs, are on the rise. Estimates are that the BEV market will rise to 23% in 2025 and jump to nearly 40% by 2030. PHEVs are estimated to rise almost 9% in 2025 and nearly 10% in 2030. They should remain more popular than traditional internal combustion cars due to tax and subsidy advantages. PHEV range and performance is also expected to improve. That's why many feel the plug-in hybrid is a key stepping stone to eventually converting to a fully electric vehicle. PHEVs are an important part of car makers' strategy to cut their average CO2 emissions and steer clear of steep fines. Take Volkswagen and the Jaguar Land Rover, for example. Jaguar Land Rover is the UK's largest automotive employer, and both these companies are among the car makers who have been told to pay out millions of dollars for breaching EU targets in 2020. At least for these companies, PHEVs are one way to go. Did you know that the UK government wants to stop sales of all new hybrid, diesel, and gasoline cars and vans by the year 2035 or sooner? But plug-in hybrids might end up being exempt from that ban. Shortly after the Volkswagen emissions cheating scandal, the European Union passed tougher car emissions regulations. These became effective in 2017. As of September 2020, new EU laws require national authorities to collect data on real-world CO2 emissions and energy consumption of cars. They would do this using onboard fuel consumption monitoring devices. The European Commission believes that this will provide more realistic emission measurements and fix the gap between emissions recorded in laboratory settings versus those on the road. But T&E wants these requirements to be even stricter. They want the government to ditch tax breaks for hybrid vehicles completely, and they also want the EU to set more aggressive CO2 reduction targets. The EU set a target of 15% CO2 reduction for cars by 2025 and almost 38% by 2030. But T&E wants the targets to be at least 25% by 2025 and 65% by 2030. They're also calling on the EU to set an end date for the sale of cars powered by fossil fuels. Their recommended date is ambitious, 2035 at the latest. Yet some say plug-in hybrids might not stick around for much longer. One of the reasons is because battery electric vehicle prices are expected to come down. This means overall BEV costs should decrease. But PHEVs, on the other hand, are expected to be constrained because of its greater mechanical complexity. And when policies push the industry to absolute zero emissions, some forecast the new PHEVs might not exist after 2030. Speaking of new PHEVs, Mazda just revealed the CX-60, a new plug-in hybrid SUV set for Europe. The U.S. market will be getting the related crossover CX-70, and it will be wider and more athletic. We're talking about 323 horsepower and 369 pound-feet of torque. This is Mazda's first car to ride on Mazda's new longitudinal platform. It's set to have an electric range of 39 miles. But you tell me, do you have a plug-in hybrid, or would you ever buy one? Do you think we're sleepwalking towards another Dieselgate? Please share your opinion by commenting below. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. Thanks for your support.